God created man in his image and likeness. Now, I could spend a few weeks on that. God created woman out of man to be a helper and companion for him. God commanded the man and woman to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. God placed the man and woman in a perfect environment to begin teaching them how to care for the earth, how to care for their children, and how to care for one another. God gave the man and woman one negative command. One negative command. Now, what do I mean by a negative command? One thing he told them not to do. See, what he told them before was to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. Those were 4 positive commands that God gave them at the very beginning. He only gave them one negative command. He put a tree in the midst of the garden, and he said, "Do not eat the fruit of this tree, for in the day that you eat of it, you shall die." One negative command. Now, why did he do that? A lot of people ask that question. Why did God put that tree in the middle of the garden? Well, it wasn't to tempt them to do evil. God placed that tree in the midst of the garden and gave them that one command to teach them faith, trust, reliance, and obedience to God. God does not tempt anyone with evil, nor can he be tempted. So he didn't put the tree in the midst of the garden to tempt Adam and Eve to do evil. He did it because he was their father. He was their source. He was their creator. And believe it or not, God wanted to delight in teaching them and training them how to live as godly men and godly women in a perfect environment that he created just for them, and to teach them how to take a raw, untamed wilderness of an earth and turn that entire planet into the Garden of Eden. He wanted to teach them. He wanted to train them. He wanted to teach them faith in God. He wanted to teach them trust in God. He wanted to teach them reliance on God, and he wanted to teach them obedience to God. That's why he put that tree there. But as we know, as we read the scriptures, man disobeyed God and brought sin and death into the world. Man lost the likeness of God and was unable to pass it on to his children. If you read Genesis chapter 5 and verses 1 through 3, I believe it is, it'll read the story about how that God had created man in his image and likeness, but when Adam was 130 years old, he had a son named Seth, not in the likeness of God, but in the likeness of Adam, after Adam had sinned and been expelled from the Garden of Eden. That's in Genesis chapter 5. What did that mean? That means that Adam no longer had access to God's holiness. He no longer had access to God's righteousness. He no longer had access to God's justice. He no longer had access to God's mercy. He no longer had access to God's compassion, and he had no longer had access to God's love. And he wasn't able to pass on any of those attributes, any of those traits through natural reproduction of children. He couldn't pass it on because he lost it in the Garden of Eden. So it's not that we have been born with this terrible guilt for the sin of Adam. It's that we have been born without the likeness of God. We've been born missing something. And that's what God has been spending the last 4,000 years trying to replace and bring back to us. The ability to have our sins forgiven, the ability to have unrighteousness removed from us, and the ability to walk in the likeness of God as well as the image of God.